Să mergem acum și la subiectul principal al emisiunii pe care l-am tot anunțat. Aș vrea să vedeți, i-am luat un interviu în exclusivitate doctorului Jerome Kim. Doctorul Jerome Kim este în prezent președintele, directorul general al Institutului Internațional pentru Vaccinuri. Este o instituție independentă, un organism independent creat de ONU în 1997, din care fac parte 32 de țări, plus OMS-ul, mă rog, se ocupă fix cu aprobare și dezvoltare de vaccinuri, dar înainte de asta, doctorul Jerome Kim are un CV absolut impresionant, este fost colonel al armatei americane, a lucrat timp de 20 de ani într-un program foarte important al armatei americane, în care a colaborat inclusiv cu doctorul Redfield, actualul șef al CDC, al Centrului pentru Controlul Bolilor din Statele Unite, și cu Deborah Birx, cea care se ocupă de fapt de campania coronavirus, e responsabilă pentru gestionarea crizei coronavirus în materie de comunicare de la Casa Albă. Ați văzut-o mereu împreună alături de doctorul Fauci și de Donald Trump. Este un interviu, este un om foarte interesant, de asta am și făcut eforturi să fac acest interviu și l-am întrebat inclusiv despre controversele legate de COVID și despre microcipare și despre cum urmează să trăim noi de acum încolo, dacă va exista sau nu un vaccin și ce trebuie să facem noi din acest punct. Doctorul Kim este în Coreea de Sud în acest moment, unde știm foarte bine, ei au avut un mare succes, însă, îmi povestea chiar doctorul Kim, din cauza a mai apărut un focar într-un club de noapte și au avut o izbucnire nouă. Și îmi povestea doctorul Kim că de la un singur om s-au mai infectat alte 367 de persoane. Și pentru a le găsi repede pe aceste 367 de persoane, autoritățile coreene au făcut, țineți-vă bine, 85.000 de teste. Haideți să vedem acest interviu și apoi vom vorbi și despre măsurile de relaxare care se aplică de luni încolo. Hello, Dr. Kim, and thank you very much for accepting this interview with us here in Romania. We know you are a very, very busy man, especially now that the whole world is looking for the news that we have a vaccine for Sars CoV-2. I'm going to ask you about this vaccine, you being the Director General of the International Institute for Vaccines. I would like to ask you, what would you say to someone who says that the countries that took lockdown measures for the SARS CoV-2 pandemic exaggerated, that maybe the herd immunity method would have been the wiser approach, you know, to protect economies and so on. I'm sure you've seen protests around the world. Not very large protests, but they were protests.
So I think that we have seen the impact of this pandemic in every country of the world that the virus has hit. You know, we've seen it hit developed economies, high-income countries like the United States and Italy, Spain, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and we've seen the enormous loss of life in those countries. I still will remember the pictures of, you know, people who couldn't be buried in Italy. And I think that, you know, this is a country, this is one of the G7 countries. And so when people are looking at that and if they're not surprised and shocked, it's a little difficult to believe. I think that that we really know the extent, we know what this virus can do. But the other thing that we know, and we sometimes lose sight of, is the idea that lockdowns, flattening the curve, are really only a temporizing maneuver. They buy a country time. They buy a country enough time to set up the kind of testing, of tracking, of isolating people who are infected, to protect others particularly, and of instituting appropriate treatment. They keep the hospital systems from being so crowded with patients that the hospital systems no longer function. So it really did buy you time. But the important part is that flattening the curve, that the lockdowns could never be permanent. And I think everyone recognizes that, you know, economies need to function in order to feed people, to keep governments going. And so that there has to be a balance. And I think I hope that one of the things that we learn from this pandemic, one of the important lessons learned is that preparation is very important. Execution is also critically important, and we failed sometimes in both.
Movies like Contagion and other movies, but Contagion is very similar to to what happened to the COVID-19 pandemics, and also declarations from the past from very known people like even President Obama in 2014, who said a pandemic is going to come, we have to be ready, made some people think about conspiracy theories. That it's something planned, I don't know, by the big pharma to sell vaccines, or by governments to see how much population is willing to take in restraining their liberties, their freedom. So, was it this pandemics predictable because of the research people like you make in this virus industry, or what would you say to these people who say there's a conspiracy behind it?
So we know that viruses arise from human to animal to human transmission. You know, the influenza viruses are like that. There's transmission from birds to domestic birds, like chickens, and from chickens into humans. We know that these things exist. We know the coronaviruses, which Sars CoV-2 is one of the coronaviruses. We know that the coronaviruses jump between animals and humans, and from humans to actually to other animals. And so this has been known, and several attempts after the big MERS outbreaks occurred, for instance, in Korea, and the Ebola outbreak occurred in Africa. Several governments were starting to look at, what viruses are those viruses that are found most frequently jumping between animals and humans, because those are the viruses that could potentially cause an outbreak. The problem is that we don't have a magic book. We can't tell this virus. We can't say this is the virus that's going to make the leap.
You said that some viruses are likely to jump from animals to humans, but did this virus jump from bats to humans? We have an argument, a global argument, where even President Trump and the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says that there might not be like that, and that they might even have evidence that this virus came from the lab from Wuhan. What is your opinion about the origin of this virus?
So I think that the vast majority of scientists, and in fact, those people who do sequencing, the people who study how viruses evolve, would say that the viruses evolved out of or came from probably from bats, maybe or maybe not now, involving something called a pangolin, and that this transmission occurred to humans naturally. And they make that determination based on the characteristics of the viruses that are found initially in Wuhan, and the viruses that were found that are found in bats and spiny anteaters throughout Asia. So by comparing these sequences and knowing the ways that viruses are mutated by men or naturally, it looks like these viruses occurred naturally. I think if other people have other theories, they should present the scientific information in scientific journals and have them reviewed by people, scientists and doctors and epidemiologists around the world, and really do a scientific review of the evidence.
I've seen a debate among the scientists if it's even possible, if people have the technology necessary to create a virus in a lab, or to combine two viruses. I'm not an expert in this field, you know much about this. Is it possible to create something like this?
The way viruses evolve is in fact shaped by nature, and that is true. Humans have the capacity to mutate viruses, in the laboratory. But that leaves signatures, fingerprints. And when people look at sequences, and they've sequenced the entire 30,000 nucleotide sequence of the coronaviruses, actually thousands of them now, they don't find these fingerprints. So there isn't the evidence of genetic manipulation that scientists who study virus mutation could identify.
If this virus would have been made in the lab, the scientists could see those traces. That's a fact. Okay, let's move forward with the conspiracy theories and get to the vaccines. There is a theory, and it's spread a lot even in Great Britain. I've seen it, that this whole pandemic was staged, or it's used to create a vaccine and to use it to inject some microchips, you know, to track, like a mass tracking for everybody, mass surveillance. Is it possible to inject in a vaccine a microchip? And I don't know, so I'm not aware of it.
So that's it's a conspiracy theory. It's, science fiction.
Science fiction, okay.
And so they do insert microchips into animals. For instance, when our dog was, when we moved from the continental United States to Hawaii, our dog was injected with a microchip to be able to verify that the dog had received vaccination against rabies. And that kind of thing happens and is done routinely for animals. We don't do that in humans. And in fact, governments exist around the world and are subject to, the democratically elected governments in particular, have a special requirement that they meet standards of privacy, of personal data, of access to personal data. And so I think that this is a discussion not to occur in speculation on television news shows, but really by carefully examining the evidence. And, again, present the evidence and have people examine it, have scientists look to see whether this is in fact occurring. And I think that the world will see that this pandemic has been significant. Over 5 million infections, over 340,000 deaths. If we had a vaccine and the vaccine were shown to be safe and effective, then people around the world, countries around the world, would be clamoring for the vaccine. Not because it's going to make a company, billions of dollars, because this is a pandemic vaccine that will be used in 7 billion people. And most of those 7 billion people, many of those 7 billion people live on $1 or $2 a day. So this vaccine is not going to be one of those vaccines that we can just charge everyone $100 a dose for. This is a vaccine that will need to be made available to people who really could otherwise not afford this kind of intervention.
The question right now is, will we have a vaccine? I've seen some opinions from some doctors, some in Italy and also in the United States, that doubt that we will ever have a vaccine. Like in SARS, we didn't have a vaccine, but also these doctors say that this COVID-19 is more like the HIV virus, and we don't have a virus for HIV, and we won't have a vaccine for this COVID-19. What would you say?
So actually, I'm originally an HIV vaccine researcher.
I know.
So it's something that's very near and dear to me. I think this virus is very different from HIV. In a number of ways. HIV, we know the human immune response does not clear the virus, cannot clear the virus. There isn't a single person who is spontaneously cured of HIV infection. Whereas with COVID, as with measles, as with hepatitis A, people actually eliminate the infection by and large from their bodies. HIV is not like that. With HIV, we also know that a person can be reinfected. So the presence of an immune response against HIV doesn't protect against reinfection. With COVID, we think that there's increasing data, although it's not perfect, there's increasing data that a person who's had COVID infection is protected against reinfection. There's now data emerging for actually several of the vaccines that are in advanced human testing, that when you vaccinate a monkey against COVID-19 with one of those new vaccines, you can actually protect that monkey against infection by COVID-19. And that's an important proof of concept in an animal model that a vaccine may work in a human. So I think that we probably will get a vaccine. And I can't guarantee that it's going to be in 6 to 18 months. But I'm pretty sure that we will be able to develop one.